broadcast tonight, the strained relations between Korea and Japan show little sign of easing as high-level talks fail to reach a breakthrough in mending ties on Wednesday. An explosion in East Harlem in New York City caused by a gas leak kills at least 6 people and injuring more than 60 others. And Korean doctors and the government are likely to return to the negotiating table over new medical policies ahead of a nationwide strike planned later this month. These stories and more next on ARIRANG News at 8. Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to those of you who are watching from around the world. It's Thursday, March 13th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Ju-yeol. There were no surprises in final rate-setting session for outgoing Bank of Korea Governor Choong-soo, whose 4-year term ends at the end of this month. The central bank has left its key interest rate unchanged at 2.5% for the 10th straight month in March. Now, following its monthly monetary policy meeting on Thursday, the BOK said the economy at home and abroad are continuing to recover at a moderate pace, but they note the risks coming from emerging markets. The nation's inflation rate ran below the central bank's target band for the 21st straight month in February, standing at 1%. The final decision on next month's key interest rate will likely fall on Bank of Korea's governor-nominee Lee Ju-yeol's shoulders. Hwang Ji has more on some of the challenges facing the veteran central bank official, who is slated for a confirmation hearing next week.
Wrapping up his final monetary policy meeting on Thursday, Bank of Korea Governor Choong-soo said he was successful during his 4-year term in giving the central bank back to the people. He added he had done his best under some difficult circumstances.
People normally say that the past 4 years represent the first and the biggest financial crisis in 100 years. The global financial market changed very rapidly.
While there has been criticism over a lack of communication with the market during his term, analysts rated Governor Kim's monetary policies as above average. The man who is now likely to be taking over the burden is Lee Ju-yeol, a veteran central bank official who's been tapped as the next governor. Experts say the main challenges for Lee will be how to cope with external risks stemming from the U.S. Federal Reserve's stimulus tapering and how to coordinate with the government to revitalize the domestic economy. They add that the new top central banker will feel a heavy responsibility as the circumstances at home and abroad are currently at odds.
The new governor should not focus on short-term goals. Blindlessly following the government's drive to boost the local economy should also be avoided. The central bank should show leadership as a pillar of monetary policies while communicating with the market.
Before taking office in April, nominee Lee will have to go through a parliamentary confirmation hearing next Wednesday. The National Assembly, however, does not have the power to veto Lee's appointment. Analysts say the first hearing in the Bank of Korea's 60-year history is expected to go smoothly, given that the central bank veteran has gone through similar procedures before while holding senior positions in the central bank. Hwang Ji, ARIRANG News.
Now, Korea, which inked an FTA with Canada earlier this week, is set to aggressively push for more bilateral trade pacts as part of a government drive to improve the trading environment for small and mid-sized companies. But concerns linger about Korea's seemingly insatiable appetite for free trade deals. Na Young-kyung has this report.
It's been 10 years since Korea signed its first bilateral free trade agreement with Chile. Since then, the trade volume between the two countries has increased more than fourfold, topping $7 billion last year. The Korean government has been signing many more FTAs over the last decade, with the most recent concluded negotiation being Seoul's trade pact with Canada. The local automobile and auto parts industry will likely benefit the most when the Canada deal takes effect. The Korea-US FTA will welcome its 2-year anniversary on Saturday, but opinions about whether the Korean economy has benefited from the much-contested deal over the past 2 years have been mixed. Last year, the government said Seoul's trade surplus with Washington jumped 44% compared to before the deal was ratified. But some industry experts say improved exports to the U.S. were on the back of a recovery in advanced economies rather than the bilateral trade deal. It remains to be seen whether the government and experts will be able to evaluate the economic effects of the Korea-US deal with one voice this year. Another trade deal drawing much attention is the Korea-China FTA. The 10th round of negotiations will take place in Korea this month. The draft for tariff concession on highly sensitive items, mostly being agricultural products from Korea, has been exchanged and will be discussed in detail at the upcoming talks. Although analysts estimate Korea's GDP will increase by up to 3% in the 10 years after the deal is signed, skeptics say the bilateral pact will devastate Korea's agricultural sector. Those for and against the government's initiative to sign more free trade deals continue to lock horns, and it's still unclear whether the government's ongoing FTA negotiations will help or harm the Korean economy. 나현경, 아리랑 뉴스.
The hopes that Korea and Japan would mend their strained ties were crushed on Wednesday. The much-anticipated high-level talks failed to make much progress as Japan's chief cabinet secretary continued to deny the country's wartime atrocities. Seoul on this Thursday expressed deep regret over the remarks. Our foreign affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
South Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs slammed Japan on Thursday for its latest offensive remarks about the victims of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women.
Japan is inflicting another wound on the surviving victims of sexual enslavement by denying its military's direct involvement, which it had previously acknowledged in the Kono statement.
The Kono statement is a landmark apology issued by Japan in 1993 to the 200,000 or so women, mostly Korean, who were forced into sexual slavery during the Second World War. Tokyo has been backtracking on that apology in recent months by calling into question the validity of testimony given by Korean women that established the basis of the statement. Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said Wednesday at a press briefing that there was no evidence that Japan forced the recruitment of women. The comments came on the same day the two neighbors were holding their first high-level talks in 8 months, which ended without results. Speculation leading up to the talks was that Japan would propose a summit with South Korea on the sidelines of the Nuclear Security Summit in The Hague later this month. More than a year into office now, President Park Geun-hye has yet to sit down with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. President Park has said she would not meet with a leader who fails to acknowledge his country's historical wrongdoings.
The South Korean government believes it is important to engage in talks when the two leaders can reach productive outcomes rather than holding talks for talk's sake.
Seoul's foreign ministry says that Japan must first take sincere steps to settle the history issues in order to hold productive talks with South Korea. Hwang Sang-hee, 아리랑 뉴스.
The U.S. state of New York is inching closer to using the name EC for the body of water between Korea and Japan. A Korean-American community group there says the New York State Senate's Judiciary Committee passed a bill Tuesday requiring that both EC and C of Japan be used in all school textbook published after July 1st. The legislation will take effect if it is passed by both state senates and signed by the governor. A similar bill was passed by lawmakers in Virginia last month and is awaiting the governor's approval. South Korea will sign a contract before the year is out to overhaul its Patriot missile system to thwart possible North Korean missile strikes from reaching their targets. Our Shin Se-min has more on Seoul's plans to modernize its arsenal.
South Korea will sign a deal to upgrade its Korea air and missile defense system by the end of this year. Officials at the Defense Acquisition Program Administration said Wednesday that it will upgrade the country's current PAC-2 air and missile defense system by incorporating PAC-3 missiles into it. The Defense Ministry has set aside some $1.4 billion for the adoption of the new defense system, scheduled to go through an evaluation process in July. The new system will finally be implemented in 2016.
We expect to give more people the opportunity to work, as most of the operations to improve performance will take place domestically.
The current PAC-2 air defense system has the capability to destroy an enemy missile target or aircraft by exploding near it, but has a low interception rate. However, the advanced PAC-3 system will be able to hit the target directly, colliding with the missile's warhead and therefore increasing its accuracy. The move to enhance Korea's air defense system has North Korea and its thousands of short-range missiles in mind. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
For the latest news that impacts Korea and the world, join Lee Ju-yeol for a lively half-hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Move aimed at fostering startups is part of the government's 3-year economic innovation plan. There is rising hope Korean doctors and the government will be able to talk through their differences and avert an upcoming doctors' strike planned for the last week of the month. Our Song Ji-san reports on some of the sticking points dividing the two sides.
Medical doctors and the governments are preparing for a meeting after Prime Minister Choong-soo proposed talks by March 20th to seek a compromise. The Korean Medical Association of Doctors, upset over government's plan to implement telemedicine and to set up for-profit subsidiaries, is planning a 6-day strike from March 24th unless an agreement is reached. Doctors claim the government's plan could undermine public health. The government, on the other hand, says the new telemedicine system is necessary to offer benefits to the elderly, disabled, and patients in remote areas, along with people with chronic diseases. The doctors are also calling for a reform of the current public health plan, saying it earns them unreasonably low consultation fees, but at the same time burdens the public because of the high costs for services not covered by the state-run health system. Many Koreans rely on private insurance as the public health plan does not cover the full range of expenses. Medical fees in Korea are relatively cheaper than those of most developed countries. For example, artery bypass surgery in Korea costs 1/6 of what it costs in the US. Hospitals have been accused of offsetting their losses by advising patients that they undergo costly checkup services like the MRIs. An OECD survey shows the pace of rise in medical spending is the second highest in Korea among member countries. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
The software business for public institutions is expected to expand nearly 8% this year compared to last. The Science Ministry said Thursday the software business of more than 2,100 government and public institutions is estimated to come in at $3.3 billion this year, up 7.9% from the previous year. The rise is mostly attributed to an increase in the budget for software infrastructure and software purchases and growing demand for new software development systems. It could be just a matter of time before we see electric vehicle charging stations at retail outlets in the nation. Our Kim Ji-yeon tells us a trio of private companies plan to install them by the end of this year.
Drivers will soon be able to recharge their electric vehicles at Emart, the largest retail outlet in Korea. Emart is aiming to install 60 EV charging stations at stores around the country by the end of this year. An Emart official says that an electric car can run for around 49 kilometers, roughly a 40-minute drive on a 1-hour charge, which may be useful for people driving short distances after shopping for groceries and heading straight home. To build the stations, Emart teamed up with POSCO, Korea's largest steelmaker, and BMW Korea, which is releasing its new i3 electric vehicle next month. The three companies plan to build 40 additional EV charging stations at Emart by next year. This is the first such attempt by private companies to facilitate the use of electric vehicles in Korea. The country's existing 1,900 EV charging stations were built with government support. Emart's new EV charging stations will be able to accommodate all kinds of electric vehicles. All users will have to do is purchase a membership card. Users will be able to find the charging station locations through a smartphone app provided by POSCO or the navigation system in the new i3. The move to launch the new stations comes ahead of the International Electric Vehicle Expo, scheduled to start Saturday at the International Convention Center on Jeju Island. More than 2,000 people are expected to attend the event, including personnel from 40 related industries, including Kia Motors and BMW. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
The world's largest furniture retailer is coming to town. Ikea is scheduled to open its first store in Korea later this year. And to give locals a taste of what to expect, the Swedish furniture giant has opened up a showroom. Lee Ju-yeol reports.
Famous for its blue and yellow supersized stores and build-it-yourself products, Ikea will open its first store in Seoul by the end of this year. Korean consumers got an early glimpse at the Swedish-based company's simple and low-priced line of furniture at a special showroom that opened this week.
I'm very excited because we get to see many different designs and can purchase them at cheaper prices.
The marketing manager for Ikea Korea says the company has worked hard to tailor to the needs and preferences of the local population.
Is very much to understand more the market. So we have done a lot of research to understand life at home, what are the dreams and needs for the many people, and then of course we will provide solutions that fits the many dreams for people in Korea.
Ikea Korea is scheduled to open up its first branch in Gwangmyeong-si in the southwest of Seoul by the end of this year, and purchased land in Goyang-si northwest of Seoul last year, where it plans to open up its second. The imminent arrival of the global furniture giant has certainly caught the attention of local furniture companies, prompting them to overhaul business strategies.
We are unveiling a lineup of premium furniture. We changed the furniture on display to more high-quality items. And we are also providing top-notch customer service. So we feel we have a good shot at winning over customers.
The nation's top furniture brands also plan to boost the number of items sold through offline channels and in online malls to extend their reach to customers. Lee Ju-yeol, ARIRANG News.
Koreans spend more than 3.5 hours a day staring into their smartphones. That's according to market research firm HSAD, which asked 1,000 Koreans about their daily use of smartphones, PCs, and televisions. On average, Koreans spend 3 hours and 34 minutes a day using their smartphones, 3 hours watching television, and 48 minutes on the computer. But perhaps not surprisingly, people in their 20s use smartphones the most, clocking in at around 5 hours and 15 minutes a day, while people in their 50s spent the least amount of time at a little over 2 hours per day. Moving now to some of the top stories on the global front, from a massive explosion that tore through 2 buildings in New York to the closing of China's National People's Congress. We go over now to our Paul Lee at the News Center. Paul, let's start with the deadly blast in East Harlem. What's the latest?
Well, the death toll from Wednesday's New York City building explosion has risen to 6, with over 60 others reportedly injured. Emergency crews have been searching through the rubble all night to rescue any missing survivors. The exact cause has not been determined yet, but authorities suspect a gas leak is to blame. Our Choong-soo has the details.
New York City's mayor has called it a tragedy of the worst kind. 2 buildings in the city's East Harlem neighborhood completely collapsed on Wednesday morning local time. Thick smoke and debris covered the neighborhood. Nearby structures were badly damaged by what witnesses say was a massive explosion. Residents close to the incident have been evacuated.
It blew out some of our windows, like in the back of the building. The whole courtyard had glass in it, and like my apartment shook.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio rushed to the scene to take stock of the situation and spoke at an emergency press conference.
There was a major explosion that destroyed 2 buildings. Explosion was based on a gas leak. The impact affected buildings around the 2 that were destroyed. Very heavy impact on the surrounding buildings. A heavy fire has ensued as well.
A resident in an adjacent building reported smelling gas just 15 minutes prior to the blast. Other people in the neighborhood have also told reporters they had smelled a gas-like odor since the day before. The New York Fire Department has classified the incident as the highest threat level possible. Around 250 firemen were on site after it occurred, and there are dozens still searching for the missing, feared trapped under the debris. Mayor de Blasio praised the city's fire department for its quick response, especially as there was no indication in time to save people. The White House says President Barack Obama was briefed on the incident and has sent his condolences to the victims' families. Kwon-soa, ARIRANG News.
All right, moving now to day 6 on that missing Malaysian plane. Paul, any breakthrough in the search?
Well, authorities say there is still no sign of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, which vanished Saturday while carrying 239 people. Hopes were raised earlier yesterday as Chinese satellite images showed possible signs of debris from the missing Boeing 777 in the East China Sea. Civil aviation officials from Vietnam and Malaysia said Thursday they sent planes to inspect the designated area, but said nothing has been found so far. Adding to the mystery, the Wall Street Journal reported that U.S. investigators suspect the plane flew up to 4 hours after it lost contact with air traffic controllers. This based on data that was automatically transmitted from the engines to its manufacturer. That would mean the jetliner could have potentially reached as far as the Indian Ocean or even the Arabian Sea. Meanwhile, authorities have not ruled out the possibility of mechanical failure, pilot error, sabotage, or terrorism.
Right, Paul, over in China, the country's top legislature has just wrapped up its annual session. Give us the details.
The nearly 3,000 delegates of the National People's Congress ended their 10-day annual session this Thursday. Chinese Premier Lee Ju-yeol said this year's event was successful in defining major missions and setting specific goals, which included fighting corruption, setting a target for economic growth, and tackling chronic pollution. Speaking of
Right, Paul, speaking of economy, which is what did the Chinese leadership have to say about the government's growth forecast this year?
Well, Lee said China would be able to ensure a reasonable economic growth rate of 7.5% for 2014, while also acknowledging the severe challenges facing the economy, namely downward pressure. He also outlined measures for the NPC for tackling pollution. They included shutting down 50,000 coal furnaces, reducing emissions for coal-burning power plants, and removing old high-emission cars from roads. Jie?
All right, Paul, thanks for the wrap-up of stories making headlines around the world. We'll see you back with more updates in just about 2 hours. Time to get a check on the weather with our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Now, Bo-kyung, it was a cloudy day here in the capital, but I hear it snowed in some regions.
That's right. About 10 centimeters of snow have piled up in Daegwallyeong of Gangwon-do province. Taking a closer look at the current conditions, due to a low pressure trough, it's still sprinkling in some parts of the southern regions, and less than 5 millimeters will fall through later tonight, so make sure to keep an umbrella handy. Well, some good news that daytime highs here in Seoul will jump up to 15 degrees over the weekend, so this should be perfect for soaking up some sun. However, please keep in mind that another round of spring showers awaits us next week. Looking ahead at Friday's readings, Seoul and Busan reach 9 degrees while Gwangju makes it to 8. Moving on to other regions, Jeju starts off the day at 4 degrees with a high of 9, while Dokdo tops out at 4. That's all the updates for now, and back to you, Ji-hye.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul. I'll be back with more news updates on our primetime news at 10 p.m. Korea time. See you then.